Some stories aren't told in headlines. They live in the quietest corners of a city. This is one of them. The story of a man you've never heard of, but who might be closer to you than you think. It was 5:40 a.m. The city still slept, but Chris Harper was already awake. He stood beside a dented trash bin on the edge of Baltimore, wearing a gray jacket with frayed seams and jeans that had forgotten warmth. In his coat pocket, a red pen, the only thing that hadn't left him yet. His breath floated in the cold morning air, but he barely noticed. He wasn't searching for food, not yet. He was searching for something else. He just didn't know what. Chris used to be someone. He once owned a small tech consultancy. He had a family, a daughter named Emma, a wife named Rachel, a desk with a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Programmer." It was all ordinary. It was all beautiful. Then came the chain reaction. A lost client, a denied loan, a failed surgery. The mortgage vanished. Rachel left with Emma. And Chris was left with nothing but silence and a red pen. He stopped introducing himself as Chris. He stopped introducing himself at all. The night the frost bit through his coat, he curled up behind a subway stairwell. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. He hadn't spoken to anyone in 3. That's when he found it. A crumpled letter tucked inside a discarded envelope. Barely legible. Even if you forget yourself, life will remember you. He read that line a dozen times. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the echo it triggered inside him. A pulse. A whisper. A chance. The next morning, he found a soggy notebook near the trash. He sat on a park bench, pulled the red pen from his pocket, and wrote, "My name is Chris Harper. I used to be someone." It was not a declaration. It was a defibrillator, a spark. And so he kept writing. Every day, same bench, same time. He didn't write for anyone. He wrote to stay real. One afternoon, a boy passing by asked, "Mister, are you drawing?" Chris smiled. "No, kid. I'm remembering." Weeks passed. One rainy evening, a woman named Margaret stopped. She was older, wore a green scarf, and had the calm of someone who'd seen loss. She glanced at his notebook. "You're a writer," she said. "No," Chris muttered, "just trying not to disappear." She read a few pages. Then she looked at him differently. "These words, they don't just belong to you. They belong to all of us who've forgotten how to speak." Margaret took his pages. Without telling him, she had them typed and printed. 100 copies. A local bookstore agreed to sell them. The cover read, "Pages from the Trash, CH." Chris stared at it like it might vanish if he blinked. But it didn't vanish. It sold. It spread. A blogger wrote about it. Then a news outlet. Then TEDx called. On the day of the TEDx talk, Chris almost didn't go on stage. Backstage, his hands trembled. Not from nerves, but from fear. The same fear he felt before sleeping outside. The fear of not mattering. "I'm not a speaker," he whispered to himself. "I'm just a guy who didn't die." Then a teenager peeked into the room. He held Chris's book. His voice cracked. "I was going to kill myself last year, but I read this, and I'm still here." Chris didn't reply. He just walked. The lights were too bright. The silence was terrifying. But Chris opened his notebook. Survival isn't the victory. The victory is deciding not to give up. No applause, just silence, the kind that listens. Months later, a letter arrived in the mail. It had no return address, just a name. Emma Harper. Inside were 5 lines. Dad, I never hated you. I missed you. I didn't need you to be perfect. I just needed you to come back. Chris held the page for an hour. Then he cried, not in regret, but in release. Chris lives in a small apartment above a library. Every morning he brews coffee, grabs a notebook, and walks to a park bench. There, he listens to stories. He helps others write. He tells them they matter. Because they do. Because he did. Sometimes you don't rise with strength. You rise with a sentence. And if you write that sentence every day, you don't just survive. You live. This was the story of Chris Harper, a man who didn't rise by being rescued, but by choosing not to disappear. If his story meant something to you, let it live on. Like, comment, subscribe, because maybe someone else needs to hear it too.